What would you do if your 18-year-old son walked into a dealership with cash in hand, only to be told to leave because of how he looked? What if they never even asked his name? This isn't just a story about buying a car. It's about quiet dignity, powerful reminders, and a mother who doesn't let injustice slide. If this moves you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The summer sun was already heavy in the Atlanta sky, a thick warmth that hung in the air like a prelude to a storm. Caleb Jackson wiped a bead of sweat from his brow as he stepped out of his small apartment, the early morning light catching the dark brown of his skin. At 18 years old, Caleb was calm, composed, and already ready to take on the world. A recent high school graduate, he had just been accepted into Georgia Tech's prestigious engineering program, a dream he'd worked hard for. But today, he wasn't thinking about his accomplishments or the excitement of starting college. Today was about something simpler, yet just as significant. Caleb was about to buy his first car. It wasn't a flashy new model or an expensive luxury vehicle. No, Caleb wasn't about making a statement. He was about getting to work, about taking the first step into his independence. This car, a used hybrid, was practical and reliable just like him. He'd saved up for months, using every spare dollar from his part-time job, and today his savings would be put to the test. He wore a faded gray windbreaker, black cargo pants, and a pair of old white Nikes that had seen better days, but they were comfortable. His appearance wasn't meant to impress anyone. He wasn't here to show off. He was here to do what he needed to do. Caleb had printed out listings for a few cars that caught his eye, each one under $15,000, well within his budget. All he wanted was something dependable for the long drives to and from school, something that wouldn't leave him stranded halfway down I-75. With a quiet determination, Caleb slid into his car and made the short drive to Oakwood Motors, a small dealership located on the outskirts of Atlanta. It wasn't flashy, but it had what he needed. As he parked in front of the dealership, the smell of warm pavement mixed with the faint scent of exhaust fumes filled the air. Caleb took a deep breath and grabbed the folder from the passenger seat. Today, he would take one more step toward becoming the man he was meant to be. Caleb stepped through the glass doors of Oakwood Motors, the cool air inside offering a welcome relief from the sticky heat of Atlanta's summer morning. The dealership, small and tucked just off the highway, wasn't flashy, but Caleb wasn't here for extravagance. He just needed something reliable. His eyes briefly scanned the polished rows of cars, but his focus remained on the task at hand. With a folder of printed listings in his hand, he was prepared to make his first serious purchase. The receptionist, engrossed in her computer, barely acknowledged his presence. She didn't look up as she asked, "Are you here with your parents?" "No, ma'am," Caleb replied, his voice calm and steady. "I'm buying it myself. I've got my financing lined up and I'm paying cash." She gave him a quick, dismissive wave toward the lot, not offering any further help. "Someone will be out shortly," she muttered, her eyes still glued to her screen. Caleb nodded politely, though a subtle hint of disappointment began to creep in. He wasn't here to beg for attention, just to buy a car. As he walked outside, he felt the humid air cling to his skin. Caleb glanced around, looking for the cars he had researched. His eyes settled on the Honda Civic, the exact model he had printed out, its VIN matching the online listing. He took a few steps forward, examining it, his mind already thinking about the long drives to Georgia Tech and the need for something reliable. But before he could reach the car, a man in a red Oakwood Motors polo walked up to him, cutting off his path. The man's eyes scanned Caleb, starting at his old sneakers and moving upward, assessing him. "You lost?" the man asked, his tone sharp as if Caleb didn't belong there. "No," Caleb replied, holding out the folder. "I'm here to look at this car I'm ready to buy." The man didn't even look at the folder, his eyes flicking back to Caleb's clothes. "This isn't a place to hang around if you're not serious," he said coldly. "We've had people come in before, take photos of cars they can't afford, cause trouble." Caleb felt a twist in his stomach, but he held his composure. "I'm serious. I just want to test drive." The man smirked, stepping back. "Why don't you come back with a parent, maybe someone who can talk financing, or better yet, try one of the cheaper lots down the road?" The words stung more than he expected. Caleb took a deep breath, glancing at the car again. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He just looked down at his folder, nodding faintly, not in agreement but in quiet understanding. Without a word, he turned and walked back to his car. As Caleb drove away, he didn't turn on the music. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the soft swish of the wipers as light rain began to streak across his windshield. He wasn't angry, he had expected this in a way. But still, it was hard not to feel that weight pressing down on him. He didn't need anyone's approval, but this was a moment he had hoped would be different. A dealership where he could walk in, make his purchase, and walk out with his head held high. The world had other plans, and Caleb, he would find somewhere else. Caleb drove home in silence, the soft hum of the engine the only sound filling the car. His mind replayed the encounter at the dealership over and over, the dismissive look, the condescending tone of the salesman, the subtle but unmistakable feeling of being judged solely on his appearance. The sting of humiliation lingered, but he didn't react. He never did. Instead, he focused on the road, watching the world outside blur by. As he drove through familiar streets, past the old park where he used to race his bike with Elijah, past the little library with its colorful reading posters still stuck to the windows, everything felt different today. The streets that once felt like home now seemed distant. The sense of comfort he once found in his surroundings now replaced with a strange sense of separation. It was as if the world had shifted slightly, making him feel like an outsider in places that had once been his sanctuary. By the time he pulled into the driveway, Caleb didn't rush inside. He sat in the car for a moment, just staring through the rain-splattered windshield. The soft drizzle had started to pick up, but he didn't mind the rain. It was almost as if it matched the heaviness he felt in his chest. He was frustrated, but not in the way most would expect. He didn't shout, didn't bang the steering wheel in anger. He simply felt smaller. But there was something more. Something quieter, more persistent, the resolve to prove to himself that he was more than what others saw. Finally, he stepped out of the car and walked into the house, the scent of lavender and freshly brewed coffee welcoming him. It was the smell of home, the smell of his mother, Dr. Monica Jackson, the woman who had always been a symbol of calm and strength. But today, as he walked into the living room, it was clear that something was different. Monica, ever perceptive, was immediately aware of the change in him. She didn't need to ask. She could see it in the way Caleb held himself, distant, quieter than usual. She didn't press him with questions right away. Monica had always been patient, letting him come to her when he was ready. She waited for him to speak. "Find anything you liked?" she asked, her voice gentle as she sat down across from him. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet frustration. "I went to Oakwood. They had some decent cars, but they told me to come back with a parent." Monica's eyes narrowed slightly, but her expression remained calm. Caleb continued, his voice steady but thick with unspoken emotion. "They treated me like I didn't belong, like I wasn't even worth their time." Monica didn't rush to respond. She watched him carefully, knowing that Caleb wasn't the kind of person to react impulsively. He kept his feelings locked inside, only letting them slip out when he trusted the moment. She could see the weight of his disappointment, and while she understood the hurt, she also knew how to address it, calmly, methodically. She wasn't one to act on impulse, especially in moments like these. After a long pause, Monica leaned forward slightly, her hand briefly resting on his knee, a silent reassurance that she was there. Then, without saying a word, she rose and walked to the kitchen to put away the dishes, her mind already working. While Caleb remained in the living room, the quiet stretching between them, Monica's thoughts were moving quickly. She wasn't angry. No, anger would be a waste of energy. But she was focused, her mind calculating the best course of action. She had dealt with this kind of situation before, people who underestimated her, who looked at her and made assumptions based on her appearance. She had learned to maneuver through it with grace and intelligence, and she knew exactly how to do the same for Caleb. By the time she finished cleaning up, Monica was already taking steps to address the issue. She wouldn't let this go unchallenged. But she wasn't about to make a scene or get caught up in a public confrontation. No, she would handle it quietly, with precision. Monica had dealt with corporate politics, with biases and assumptions, her entire career. This would be no different. She knew how to make her presence felt without raising her voice. That night, she quietly began gathering information about Oakwood Motors, starting with the dealership's owner, the staff, and any history of complaints. She was patient and methodical, knowing that the best approach would be one of strategy, not emotion. In the morning, when Caleb was still asleep, she would be well prepared to make sure they understood the mistake they had made. Caleb, meanwhile, was unaware of the plans his mother had already set in motion. He was still processing the encounter, reflecting on what had happened. But what he didn't know was that Monica was already taking action that would show Oakwood Motors that people like Caleb were not to be dismissed. The next morning, Monica Jackson settled into the plush leather seat of her Bentley Continental GT, the engine purring to life beneath her. The car, a symbol of years of dedication and hard work, gleamed under the early sunlight. But Monica wasn't driving it to show off. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She was driving it to make a statement that her presence would not go unnoticed. The drive to Oakwood Motors was quick, but her mind was already focused on the task at hand. She had faced prejudice throughout her life, people who doubted her ability because of her gender or race, and she had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than anger. She would speak with precision today, using her strength and authority to make sure her son was treated fairly. When she arrived, the sight of the Bentley parked outside didn't go unnoticed. The receptionist, who had barely looked up when Caleb had entered the day before, immediately noticed the sleek car. Her gaze lingered on it, then shifted to Monica walking into the dealership. Monica's every step was deliberate, her posture straight, and her presence unmistakable. There was no need for a grand entrance. Her mere arrival commanded respect. The receptionist quickly dialed the manager's office, her fingers trembling as she glanced at Monica, sensing that today was going to be very different. Within moments, Dan Grisson, the general manager, appeared in the showroom. He extended his hand with a practiced smile, though his eyes kept flicking toward the Bentley outside. "I'm Dan Grisson, general manager here," he said, his tone warm but cautious. "How can I assist you today?" Monica didn't shake his hand. She didn't need to. Instead, she met his eyes with unwavering calm. "You had an interaction with my son yesterday," she said, her voice even but filled with quiet authority. "He's 18 years old. He came in to look at some cars, had financing ready, and was prepared to pay cash. But instead of being treated as a customer, he was told to leave." Dan's face flickered with a hint of surprise, but he quickly masked it, trying to remain composed. "I meet a lot of people," he said, his tone dismissive. "There may have been some misunderstanding." Monica didn't flinch. She calmly opened the folder she had brought and laid it down on the counter, its contents neatly arranged. "This is my son's folder," she said, pointing to the papers. He showed your staff exactly what he wanted to look at. He was serious about buying a car, yet you dismissed him based on nothing more than his appearance. Dan shifted uneasily. Look, I understand if he felt disrespected, he said, his voice faltering slightly. I can offer him another visit. I'll personally walk him through the inventory. Monica cut him off with a soft but firm shake of her head. No, that won't be necessary. The issue here is not that he didn't get a second chance. The issue is that you assumed his worth without even asking his name. You assumed he didn't belong here, and that is unacceptable. Her words were sharp, precise. She wasn't raising her voice. There was no need. The truth was loud enough on its own. She placed her business card on the counter with deliberate care. It was sleek, black, with silver embossing. Dr. Monica Jackson, CEO, Jackson Biotech Solutions. Even if he were not the son of a CEO, he would still deserve respect. Your staff did not give him that, and that's what this is about. Dan's eyes flicked to the card, his discomfort growing as the weight of her words settled in. Monica held his gaze, letting the silence stretch for a moment. She wasn't done. You can't judge people based on their appearance or assumptions, she continued, her voice unwavering. I don't care if he's wearing a windbreaker and old sneakers. He's serious about his future, and he deserves the same respect as any other customer who walks through your doors. Dan opened his mouth to respond, but Monica didn't give him the chance. And just so you know, she said, turning to leave, her words steady, I didn't come here because Caleb asked me to. He didn't want me to. He told me not to make a big deal, but that's the difference between him and me. He gives grace. I give reminders. With those final words, Monica turned and walked out of the dealership, her heels clicking purposefully against the floor as she left. Her presence lingered in the air like an unspoken challenge, and even though she didn't look back, she knew the message had been received. Dan stood there for a moment, speechless, his mind racing. He had encountered many customers, but this was different. The reality of the situation hit him harder than he expected, and the weight of his actions hung over him. He hadn't just dismissed a potential buyer, he had dismissed someone deserving of respect. The receptionist whispered under her breath, "Was that really her son yesterday?" Dan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth had already been laid out in front of him. Monica had left Oakwood Motors with a quiet strength that would resonate far longer than any confrontation. And while Caleb was still unaware of his mother's actions, the dealership would never forget the day they mistreated the wrong person. The morning after Monica's visit, Oakwood Motors began to feel different. The air was a bit quieter, the usual buzz of salespeople and customers subdued. The changes started almost immediately, beginning with a meeting that Dan Grisson called early in the morning. The topic, a new training program on bias, respect, and how to handle customers fairly, no matter their background or appearance. Monica's words had clearly struck a nerve. Dan, though initially defensive, had come to understand that his dealership's approach to customer service was flawed. He could no longer ignore the fact that young buyers, especially those from marginalized communities, weren't always treated with the respect they deserved. The sales staff was given clear instructions to treat every customer with professionalism, ensuring no one was judged based on assumptions. A more inclusive, thoughtful approach to customer service was now on the horizon at Oakwood Motors. Meanwhile, Caleb continued his search for a car, unaware of the changes unfolding at the dealership that had turned him away. He visited another lot across town, where he was greeted with the respect and professionalism he had hoped for. The salesperson didn't make assumptions about his background or his ability to purchase a car. Caleb was shown the same cars he had researched, and after a brief but thorough conversation, he test drove a Hyundai Sonata. It felt like the perfect fit, reliable and affordable, just what he needed for the long drives to Georgia Tech. By the end of the day, Caleb had signed the papers and bought the Sonata, free from the skepticism he had faced at Oakwood Motors. As he drove away from the dealership, he felt a sense of pride, not just because he had finally purchased his first car, but because he had navigated the process with patience and grace, just as his mother had taught him. Back at home, Monica felt a deep sense of relief, not because she had intervened, but because she was proud of how Caleb had handled the situation. His quiet dignity and strength spoke volumes. She knew that no matter what, he would always stand firm in who he was, no matter how the world tried to see him. In the days that followed, Caleb didn't talk much about Oakwood Motors. Not because he had forgotten, but because he had moved forward. He had handled the moment with quiet strength, choosing not to lash out or let it define him. He learned something deeper that week, something his mother had always tried to teach him. Self-respect doesn't come from how others see you, but from how you choose to carry yourself. Even in the face of judgment and dismissal, Caleb stayed composed. He didn't beg for validation or try to prove his worth to those who couldn't see it. Instead, he let his actions speak, and when he found the right place, he bought the car on his own terms. That choice, to stay calm, to walk away with dignity, was his real victory. From Monica, Caleb saw another lesson take shape. Sometimes, the most powerful response to discrimination isn't noise, it's clarity. A firm reminder delivered with precision can shift mindsets far more than anger ever could. Monica didn't fight back with rage, she fought back with facts, presence, and principle. And in doing so, she showed her son that quiet strategy isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Together, they proved that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands tall.